On today's Locked On Bucks, we explore the weakest link model for building teams. Will this benefit the Bucks? What does the Eastern Conference look like moving forward? And where does Brook Lopez end up? More importantly, for how much money? That comes your way after this on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. You can find me on the Bucks Radio Network. You can catch Camille's work on the Locked On NBA podcast and the Technical Foul podcast as well. We thank you for making this your first listen of the day each and every day. And pleased to be joined once again by Fayaz of Brew Hoop. As on yesterday's show, we went back into the Giannis conversation and the trade front there, some of the other rumors that have popped up around the Bucks, some interesting names that the Bucks could possibly target, again, with more flexibility this summer. And a couple more to get to on today's show, but a larger discussion about the Eastern Conference as a whole as well. I guess let's just start with the East here. And the Bucks certainly appear to be, as Camille and I have talked about this too, Van. It's interesting that you may phrase it as a gap year, assuming you keep most of this group together, and Giannis more importantly. Say, well, maybe it's a gap year. They take a step backward. The benefit you have this year too is knowing, even mentioning on yesterday's show, the Pelicans insinuating everybody's available, that it's probably going to be a down year for New Orleans again as well. They have the pick swap. So look, as long as, even if you're, not where you hope to be, as long as you're at the back half of the playoff teams, doesn't really hurt you. You're keeping your pick, and there's going to be no pick swap there. But teams are going to take a step back. For the Bucks, I don't know. I get on the surface what it means, but I have a hard time saying Bucks are going to be taking a step backward when, if taking a step backward is, winning 45 games opposed to 49 and 48 the last 2 years and losing in the first round, how much of a step backward is that?
Seems like lateral motion might be more likely based on the Bucks situation as we know it now with Giannis and without Damian Lillard. But looking around the rest of the East, you two have talked about it. Boston, even before Jason Tatum tore his Achilles, was in a tough spot financially because the extensions for Brown and Tatum are coming due, and these guys are each making over $70 million pretty soon. So they're way over the second apron. There's only 1 year left on Porzingis' deal. Drew Holiday, our old friend, he's got, is it 3 or 4 years left at like $110 million?
He is
he's almost 35,
he's got 2 years and then the player option.
Right, which seems like very likely to be picked up because he'll be 37 years old. Yes. And then Derek White, who has the best contract out of any of them. I don't think he's even making $20 million next year. But he seems the most likely one that they'll keep. I think one of those other two names.
Next year is when he gets a sizable increase.
Right.
So he goes up to 28 next year.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still relative to the rest of the group.
Yeah, that's the best deal of those three. So, and then Al Horford's a free agent, 39 years old. The Celtics are having to kind of break up the band like even sooner than the Bucks had to. And like their tax bill just came due. Their credit card bill, maybe is a better way to put it, just came due a lot sooner. So
they didn't time it out where they didn't buy everything at the beginning of the month. They waited until
the
end of the inside.
Exactly. Yeah, before they got paid. So they're in a similar situation as the Bucks, where they might kind of be in that mid-tier. Like the Bucks were just a mid-tier East team last year. Yeah. Then because you had three teams, so Boston finished second. You have the Cavs, who won 64 games, but there are a lot of questions about them still, especially as it relates to the postseason. And then you had the Pacers and the Knicks each around 50 wins, just a few games ahead of the Bucks. The Pistons, who were at 44, but of course, an up-and-coming team, the Magic, if they find someone who can score and shoot.
And had better health luck, too. They did get decimated throughout this season.
They sure did. I mean, they, and I think also, so believe it or not, the Philadelphia 76ers will be looking at just the top 6 and thinking, well, if we're healthy and maybe we just reshape our roster a little bit this offseason, we can get into that group. Maybe even the same with the Hawks, dare I say the Toronto Raptors, depending. They seem to want to add a little bit this offseason. It's just like it's an open conference, because I don't think that the Knicks or the Pacers or the Cavs, certainly not the Cavs based on what happened in the second round, are just like unimpeachable favorites at the top of it. Like their regular seasons for New York and Indiana just weren't dominant enough. And despite their luck in the postseason, well, I shouldn't say luck, like maybe a little bit for the Pacers, but their success in the postseason, they probably, like, they were doing this from sort of that mid-tier of the conference too. It seems just easier than ever now, if you are a mid-seeded team, to make a run to the NBA Finals, just based on what we've seen happen to some of these teams like Boston and Cleveland in the playoffs, where they run out of gas, they get injured, and of course that's happened to the Bucks too.
It has. And I think that's also the argument around like the whole depth conversation of like, when you look at the Pacers, a team that used the regular season of saying like, hey, we're going to lean on our depth to make sure that when we get to the playoffs, guys are fresh, they're good to go, they're healthy, woo, woo, woo. They get to the playoffs, and instead of them actually restricting a lot of these minutes, well, I guess they don't go 12 deep now. It's only 10 deep, for the Pacers at this point, but kind of scoffing at the face of traditional playoff logic of you only play your top 7, 8 guys and you play them heavy minutes and that's it. And the Pacers are like, no, if we got the numbers, we're going to continue to roll with it. And with that, looking at the East, if the Celtics take a step back, which I assume that they will, not a 61 win team again next year, do the Cavs cross 60 wins this upcoming season? Possibly in the I have no question what they could do in the regular season, but you have playoff questions about them. And if there's more wins to be had, and we've talked about the parity that you're starting to see, I think it's spread out a lot more. And Justin, you made the comment of like, how much different is the expectation when, you got 48 wins this year, 49 wins last year? What's a 45 win season look like for you? And I made the joke earlier when we had the episode with Frank of just saying the expectation is just different now. The difference now is like, you went into this season thinking championship, and then you're a 5 seed and it's like, dang. But next year, a 5 seed, and understanding like if you get the right matchup, you could possibly make some noise along the way. And we've said it time and time again, in addition to being good and playing good basketball at the right time, you have to have some luck. You have to be healthy along the way as well. So depth is another piece that can help with that. But overall, when I look at the Eastern Conference, I said it before, but I don't see why Giannis would want to leave the Eastern Conference because of the amount of parity. And like the Bucks, I don't see them being projected to be so bad where it's like a failed season. Like they could make some noise if things break their way.
Yeah, to Van's point, we look at the last 3 finals. You've had a 4 seed in the Pacers, a 5 seed in the Mavs, an 8 seed in the Miami Heat. I think it was 2 3 seeds when it was, or a 2 and a 3 seed when it was the Warriors and Celtics. So
same with the Bucks and the
Bucks and Suns was a 3 and a 2.
Also,
yes,
the Heat were a 4 seed in their bubble run too. So
yeah. So yeah, it is creating that path. Whereas, as we've said, it's just kind of reached the point of it's no longer a star league so much as it's just limit the liabilities that you have on the floor. And this is really the test case, this finals, I think, of is it better off to have we've got some guys, or we have a guy in the model of building your team. So that's going to be an interesting thing to watch in this finals. But we mentioned the Celtics quite a bit. There's another interesting name that came up when we were talking about the layout of the Eastern Conference that does not get quite as much mention, but financially they're not that different from the Boston Celtics. So we'll get into that conversation and start to take a look at the market for Brook Lopez coming up after this on Locked On Bucks. Well, this As this episode of Locked On Bucks is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let's talk about something that doesn't get talked about enough: men's mental health. There's this pressure to always keep it together, to perform, provide, and never show any weakness. The truth is, real strength comes from opening up and taking care of your mental well-being. Every year, 6 million men in the U.S. experience depression, and many go undiagnosed. But talking to someone, a friend, a loved one, or a therapist can make a huge difference. Therapy isn't just for crisis moments. It's great for learning how to set boundaries, build healthy coping tools, and be the best version of yourself. With over 35,000 licensed professionals, BetterHelp makes it easy to find a therapist who understands you. You can connect from anywhere, switch therapists at any time, and fit sessions into your schedule with just a click. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. So that other team that was referenced before, the Cleveland Cavaliers. And, we talk about the spot that the Celtics are in, and their big strength. Look, this, contrary to the belief of some Celtics fans out there, this didn't just pop up all of a sudden with, oh, no, here's the second apron, and this means we're screwed. Like, we knew this the last couple of years. Hey, eventually it's going to get expensive, and they're going to have to look into breaking things up here. The benefit that they had, though, was that starting five is really good. The depth piece of there's only so many things you can do if you're bringing in minimum guys. You got a pretty solid starting five. You got a decent bench when you started to develop guys like Sam Hauser and Peyton Pritchard that you felt like we got a couple of years that we can coast on this. Then Jason Tatum gets injured, and then you're staring at that bill, and you realize we got to start to break this up. Even names like Sam Hauser, who jumps up from the minimum to $10 million this upcoming season. There's a chance you got to trade him too. The Cleveland Cavaliers are in a pretty similar spot. And I think the difference for teams like the Bucks, like the Celtics, if it comes to this with the Denver Nuggets, those teams at least won championships that they can say, well, at least it worked that one year that we got a title to show from it. Right now, that's not the case for Cleveland. And we mentioned that salary figure. It's $227, I think, that the Celtics are currently facing with 12 guys under contract. It's $219 million for the Cavs with 11 players under contract. So that second apron level is $207 million. They're already $12 million past the second apron and need to fill out the rest of their roster. Donovan Mitchell's going to be approaching $50 million in the next season. Darius Garland's extension is going close to $40 million. DeAndre Hunter, you just brought in $23 million for him. Jared Allen is all of a sudden a very interesting conversation, and he's under contract through 2029. Evan Mobley's deal goes from $11 million to $46 million next season. So it's all of a sudden a very expensive group that hasn't gotten out of the first round with essentially the same cast for the last three, or out of the second round with the same cast basically for the last 3 years.
They just they strike me as kind of like maybe an Eastern version of like I shouldn't say the Suns, but like
the Jazz from a couple of years ago.
Maybe, yeah, that's a good example. I wasn't saying like
Donovan
this.
Mitchell.
I wasn't saying this iteration of the Suns, like as we know now, but more like like the one a couple of years ago, like before the Bradley.
The one that was building something before they just completely quit in the Mavs series.
Right. Yeah, like the Jazz is maybe the better comparison to as well, which never made it out of the second round either, and had committed a lot of money to a big and Donovan Mitchell. I think maybe the Cavs have a few more years prior to that scenario eventuating, but they're going to be very limited in what they can do because they're well over that second apron. I mean, because Jared Allen, if they want to trade him, or Hunter, let's say, or Garland, who is now popping up in trade rumors again,
which makes sense,
they're going to have to break that up into smaller contracts, or at least just take someone smaller salary-wise back. prior to this year, I mean, there was a lot of talk over the last few years about whether that Garland and Mitchell backcourt can work. It's small, the defense, all that stuff. They committed to it. It got them 64 wins this year with a new coach and everything. I still don't get the sense that it's going to work too well going forward, because they now kind of look like one of these just star-heavy teams that we're starting to move away from in the NBA today. Like one thing I mentioned you two off air is how, because of the new CBA, and it's shifted away from like a team that's built around 2 or 3 all-stars making, max salaries, is that the Bucks were kind of right at the tail end. They were sort of right straddling the border between this era of the 2010s and early till 2022, I guess, where you're focused around high-paid stars, to now seeing a team like the Thunder in the finals who just have guys on rookie contracts still and then one superstar, or the Pacers who don't really have a superstar and just don't really have any weaknesses either.
Yeah.
I read this today. This is the first time the NBA Finals has not had a taxpayer in it in the history of the luxury.
In the history of the tax being put in, yeah.
Going back to 2003. So, yeah, that is going to make teams reevaluate things a lot. And the Bucks just kind of, the Bucks, the Celtics, the Cavs now, like you've got all these all-stars on your team. They're very highly paid. The Bucks might be in better position to pivot into something more like what the Pacers and I guess the Thunder are than those other teams. I'm not saying they will, but it's just going to be a lot easier for them because they don't have to deal with the second apron, and those other teams do.
And Camille, the Pacers' benefit is they have 2 high contracts next season and this season too, in Pascal Siakam and Tyrese Halliburton. That those 2 combined, they're making the same amount. They're at just over $90 million combined. But outside of that, as of this moment, you got Andrew Nembhard, whose extension kicks in and he goes from $2 million to 18. So you start to take on a little bit of water there. But outside of that, it's all guys making around $11, $14 million that they don't have all of those. Okay, you got a 40 million, you got a 30 million, you got a 25 million, kind of like the Cavs are spread out. Now, this is with no Miles Turner under contract, and that's going to be interesting to see what happens there with him. But still, they don't have that influx of really expensive contracts. They've done a good job of churning out the back half of the roster and finding guys that work at manageable salaries, and not only work, but fit with the team that they've built. And to me, that's the more interesting part about the Cavs moving forward in the discussion that probably isn't going to go away once we get closer to the draft over what about these 4 guys? Does it work? That annual conversation of, can you have Garland and Mitchell? Can you have Jared Allen and Evan Mobley? Is not just the fact of that cap figure we put out there and how much it's already over the second apron this upcoming season, but those 4 guys, I mean, if we include the player option for Donovan Mitchell in 27-28, all 4 of those guys are under contract through that season. One of those guys is under contract through 29-30. 2 are under contract through 28-29. So even getting out there, 3 years from now, they're already pushing up against the second apron with just 5 guys under contract. That's the bigger problem, is you can handle this for 2 years. Your window is probably 3 years. But as that goes out further and further, that's where it's just, we got to exit this. We got to start to sell off pieces.
Yeah, and I think for some teams, they don't really care about the future part. Like, I make the joke with the Celtics of like, the prior ownership was like, yeah, let's sign all these contracts for sure. Do it. You get a championship, and it's like,
and then they sold the team.
Right.
I'm not about to deal with that.
It's like the Magic Johnson one come to life.
I'm not going to be
here no more. Like, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, get your money. Yeah, we're gonna pay you. Sure. But I'm not going to be here to make the decision on how we make this continue to make sense going forward. And even thinking about a few more years out into the future, like if expansion does hit the league, which it feels like we're heading in that direction of adding, 2 more NBA teams, and you spread this talent out even a bit more. Like now, some of these guys who are making these contracts, now you're going to be heading your own teams. Like just the landscape overall, even outside of just how the CBA is now affecting this next era of the NBA, thinking about what expansion is going to do when you have to spread this talent pool out even more. And maybe that's what brings the middle class, quote unquote, back a little bit, of just having a few more teams, a few more slots to compete for. But up until then now, like, again, that middle class, I think, is going to be an area where teams who were building under the previous CBA of trying to get those stars and then relying on minimum contracts, which we've seen the Bucks go that route. I mean, we just mentioned Phoenix going that route. A lot of teams who have been cash strapped just attach it to the fact, like, we have this star and you have a real shot to win here. Let's see how many guys are still up to take minimums when there's opportunity to maybe take, a few million more to play for a team that might not have that big star, quote unquote. But if we can get enough of these guys here who like the hoop, can play together, have a certain style, have good coaching, like, we can take that risk. So it's going to be really fun to kind of watch how the NBA continues to evolve over the coming years.
Yeah, that's an interesting point about the middle class maybe coming back as there's more money coming in the league, or the talent pool has to diffuse a little bit. I think I probably see that happening more towards like the latter part of this decade, if we're all still here on planet Earth, because I think a lot of these contracts are going to have to like run their course first, like even like Damian Lillard being paid what $63 million, or no, 58.
The 35% is something that I do wonder in the next CBA. Like, at what point do we start to?
Yeah, what do we change the supermax?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Or like limit. We can only have X amount of supermaxes that are out there.
Exactly.
Otherwise, what's the point of a supermax?
Mm-hmm. You're seeing few of those signed, regardless. Like, even like, think about Rudy Gobert. He was eligible for a supermax. He didn't get it because that just wasn't the market for him. As good as he is at everything except, I guess, shooting outside of 5 feet or whatever. So. Yeah, I think the team building, it's just totally changed. And you look at these rosters which don't have weaknesses. There's the whole weakest link theory that you guys have brought up, which I don't remember exactly, but it kind of, and looking at the Pacers, who are going sort of 10 deep now, and no one really has a flaw. They can all play, and I think this is true for the Thunder too. They have about the same amount of guys, and all of them can play in just kind of any matchup. And then you look at the Bucks, who, well, they just have had players who aren't suited for matchups that they're in pretty much every season since the title, and prominent players. None of them have been at the top of the roster, but because of injuries, they've had to step into bigger roles. Like, think about, what Grayson Allen, George Hill had to do in 2022 when Chris Middleton went down, or I guess Kyle Kuzma and Kevin Porter Jr. this year when Damian Lillard went down. Now, obviously, Kevin Porter Jr. did a little bit better, but for the Bucks, I always looked at it, and this is, again, based on the old kind of star top heavy way of roster construction that the Pacers and Thunder don't currently ascribe to. You need to have 7 guys in any playoff game, any series, so you can rely on, like, who are going to help you, who are going to help you more than they hurt you. That kind of works with this weakest link theory. But yeah, 7 at least. Like, we saw, like, when in the Brooklyn series in 2021, they only had 6. And it was just because Kevin Durant put his toe on that line. That was the difference. So, and of course, an injury to Kyrie Irving and some injuries to James Harden too. I think, you have to, for the Bucks, they have to find guys who are just better suited for every series that they can play. It doesn't have to be the same guys every night. I think that's happening with the Pacers too. Like, you don't see Ben Shepherd some nights. You don't see Jarrett. Well, you're not going to see Jarris Walker really.
We
anymore,
saw,
but
yeah.
You don't see
Tony Bradley pop in.
Yeah, Tony Bradley. Yeah, and like, he's got some sort of little day-to-day thing now. So is it going to be Thomas Bryant? I mean, I think the Bucks have some of those guys now. Like, how about Jericho Sims? AJ Green, Gary Trent. if they can retain him, Kevin Porter Jr., if they retain him, they have more of those guys than they did in previous seasons. Certainly in 2024, when by the end of that series, it was like, who do the Bucks trust besides Chris Middleton and Damian Lillard? If he can play, it's basically like, I guess, Patrick Beverley and maybe Brook Lopez. Certainly not Bobby Portis. Bobby Portis was one of those guys this year. Mm-hmm. So I think they have more of those dudes, but it's sort of filling out that middle of the roster now with more reliable guys, which they couldn't really do, or they just didn't do in like 2022, 2023, 2024.
There's an interesting conversation to be had about the Oklahoma City Thunder, the other team that's in the finals, Camille. And we've mentioned it quite a bit, but Van's thoughts on Brook Lopez, a very polarizing name out there among Bucks fans. We'll get to that conversation coming up after this. Time to talk to you about our friends over at Open Phone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. If you think about it, when was the last time you had an urgent need? Maybe for a plumber or a service provider. If the first person you called didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You just moved on to the next on the list. That's why you need Open Phone. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or computer. It lets you manage business calls and texts from a single app, and their shared inbox feature is a game changer. Your team can jump into any conversation instantly without missing a beat. Their AI agent handles after-hours calls, answers common questions, and captures leads, so you never miss a customer. Open Phone is offering our listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That is openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have existing numbers with another service, Open Phone will port them over at no extra charge. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers. So I mentioned the Thunder. I don't want to spend too much time on them since we're primarily focused on the East, but it is going to be interesting to see what's the window for any team moving forward, because the Thunder are set up better than any team we've seen in this era, certainly, with your young players.
They're going to have to pay those guys.
Eventually.
Well, and that was my next point, is even when you look at, their cap situation, they're in a good spot next year, that they're still projecting to be under the tax and well under the first apron, with everyone under contract for next season. And Nikola Topic, who we did not see this season, gets thrust into the mix next year. And you mentioned all the young guys that they have, but it's really once you get past next season that it starts to get interesting, and that Shea's going to be due for a supermax to be the highest paid player in the league. Chet Holmgren and J-Dub were making a combined like $18 million this year. It's $20 million next year that they're going to have to pay those guys. So I do think this model gives you a window to be the most competitive for about 3 years. And, that's going to butt up to right where the Thunder are going to have to start to pay guys, and they're no longer clear of that first apron.
And as you guys have mentioned, you got to hit on your draft picks.
Yes,
this kind of
also
thing.
Got to have draft picks.
Oh yeah, too. Yeah, that too. Well, and the Thunder have more than anybody, right? So
yeah,
it's not just those guys either. Like Kason Wallace,
AJ Mitchell,
Isaiah Joe, Dort is possibly and Isaiah Hartenstein. They have club options due on them. So they have some time, but they're in this position really because they hit on like a number of draft picks, high draft picks between 2021 or so. Well, I guess that was the Josh Giddey year, 2022 and 2024, really.
And Camille, they pulled the ripcord on Josh Giddey, and they got the guy that Doc Rivers was telling everybody is going to be the MVP and best player in the league.
He just knew. He knew SGA was going to be the guy. But I mean, I don't want to say he can't. I won't say he felt the same way about AJ Johnson, but Doc is now on the record of it's tough to let an AJ Johnson go. But no, I think the Thunder are interesting. But this finals matchup is a team of two teams with depth, and they young teams playing a certain way. So it's going to be a really fun finals. I could care less about the markets. I don't care that it's Indiana and Oklahoma City. I care about
well, let me
the
ask you,
quality of
Camille,
the
did you know that Paul George used to play for both those teams?
the Paul, I forget what they're calling it, but like, the Paul George finals here of his departure benefited both of these teams greatly to get them on the track to be where they are today. But I know we're coming up close on time too, and I am really curious about the Brook Lopez piece that we have been talking about, because we've mentioned on the show that we think the path forward, all the everydayers have heard us. Younger team, get some guys who can play some defense. But we have mentioned the fact as well of like, but we do think there's a role for certain players if it's different than what we've seen before. So for Brook Lopez, don't think that Brook Lopez, if he came back to Milwaukee, is somebody who I'm like, yeah, you need to start him. But I do think he offers a valuable skill set, even though some of the skills are starting to decline at the age of 37 with just the foot speed and whatnot. But he is still a floor stretching footer who can play some defense. So Van, you mentioned that you've been kind of looking into the market for Brook Lopez. So I'm really curious to know what your thoughts are about where he might end up and also how much he might get paid.
Yeah, I actually just put up a piece about this on Brew Hoop today, and
Y'all
I
go
agree
read it
with
on Brew
both
Hoop.
of you. Yeah, I'll try not to spoil all of it, but I agree with both of you. Where I think wherever he goes, whether it's the Bucks or elsewhere, it's going to be in more of a role player type situation where he probably isn't starting. And I looked this up. If you just take out one season in Brooklyn, and one season when he came, let's see, like he was injured. I think early in his career that he had the foot problems. He's started, I guess, 1,021 of 1,033 games. But I think those days are probably over for him, no matter where he goes. And yeah, he still has a lot that he can bring teams. And I think there are a lot of places he fits. And one of them is still Milwaukee, but the Lakers, we know, have always kind of rued letting him leave for the Bucks in 2018. Yeah. They've been rumored for him in the past. I don't think I've seen that necessarily this offseason. But the team I have seen, and you probably talked about, is the Warriors might be interested in him too. Again, I think, I don't think he's necessarily, I mean, he might be a starting center for both those teams, but he's still probably playing like 20 some minutes. The Rockets, as we know, tried to give him a big contract 2 years ago. I think they could still get involved because they're losing Steven Adams. Jock Landale is non-guaranteed next year, and I think he works with Şengün. The Pelicans have had some interest in the past, and I think he makes sense next to Zion if Zion remains there. But talking about the actual contract he's going to get, earlier in the season, like he had let's be clear, he had a very good regular season offensively. I mean, it was one of the best shooting seasons. I think he was only 0.1% fewer under than his career high from deep. True shooting at 62.4. He played in all but like 3 games. He still protects the rim. I mean, he's not as fleet-footed as he used to be. He's not switching on the guards like he was in 2021, but I think he can be a good role player for a lot of teams. It's just a matter of whether, they can sign him, and honestly, if they can outbid the Bucks, really, because the Bucks have bird rights on them, which means that they can just go over the cap. They don't have to worry about. They can sign him to whatever they want. They don't have to worry about cap space.
They got to wait and use, like we're gonna sign you, but we're gonna use these other things first.
Yeah, right. So you have to keep his cap hold on the books in order to do that. So you won't be able to get cap room. But I thought maybe during the year with just how he was playing, he might be able to get the non-taxpayer mid-level, I should say, like 14 million. Certainly over 1 year at most, 2 with, I think the second year would be a team option. I still think that length is possible, but now looking at it more, like it's probably going to be the taxpayer mid-level, 5.7 million. And those teams I mentioned, LeBron James is sticking around on that player option, it sounds like. So the Lakers are not going to be able to give him more than that. They're just going to have the taxpayer mid-level. But the Warriors too, they can't go more than that. And if the other teams I mentioned, like the Pelicans or the Rockets, want to do that and go, beyond 5.7 million, that's going to hard cap them at the first apron. Do you really want to do that for Brook Lopez at this point? So none of this applies to the Bucks. And again, like if his market is limited to 5.7 million over 1 year, maybe with that, like I said, team option the second year, the Bucks could just, go a little bit higher than that, like around 6, maybe. Honestly, if they even went up to like 9 million or so, it wouldn't be so bad because it at least gives you a tradable contract, right?
Yeah.
I know a lot of fans will bristle at it, just bring him back, but I think there's a good number to have him at the role where he'll be best suited for in Milwaukee. And whether or not he plays out the entire contract in Milwaukee, we'll see. But it would, I think, for nothing else, it would just, if nothing else, I should say, it would be a good like expiring contract to use in a trade.
I think if his market is the taxpayer mid-level, I'm not going to say you have to, but I would strongly urge the Bucks to retain him if that is the market value for him. Even if it means, hey, it's a reduced role, or we're going to severely limit the number of games that you play for us, that's part of our way of kind of enhancing you and expanding your career or extending it a little bit, is, all right, you don't need to play 80 games in a season anymore. Like, we're going to play every handful of games and we're going to monitor your minutes.
55,
and if he doesn't start too, but the other piece is a tradable contract and just have one of those level deals to keep around. That's where I kind of am too, is you look around at other teams, and I think we've kind of assumed, and a lot of it is Bucks fans hoping, unfortunately, that Brook isn't on the team next season. If it does come to that, I'm going to be very bummed because of how important he's been throughout this era of Bucks basketball. There's a strong case that he should have his number hanging in the rafters when it's all said and done. And just, again, the value that he brings. And it's easy to look at the last thing that happens and say it's Brook's fault. But I was talking about this with somebody else that covers the Packers and saying, well, I think the frustrating part for a lot of us that look at Brook, and I'm not trying to say that there's no foot speed issues or any of that, and he's not showing signs of age, but there's still value there. It's easy to look at that last part of the play and say, well, he screwed up, when it's kind of similar to watching football and saying blown coverage, the cornerback was beat there, when like, well, was it zone? Was it his guy? Was the guy supposed to take him in the flats there? All that goes into play. I think in looking through it, there was 3 teams that stood out to me. So as we start to wrap here, I'm curious your guys' thoughts on these landing spots of teams that are going to have that figure to spend, and the fit seems to make sense. You mentioned the Warriors. Yeah, there's that component that would, we'll keep that, but 3 other ones. I mean, the Lakers. Yeah, I get his name always pops up with them. It just seems like that's not the center type you want to pair with Luka Doncic. So to me, the 3 teams I landed on were the Orlando Magic, to give you a stretch big, and not only the fit for Brook too on the court, but to be living that close to Disney World or playing that close to it. He already lives that close. Yeah. Orlando seemed to make sense to me. The San Antonio Spurs, to give a true big, that it's another stretch big and another rim protector and some more protection for Victor Wembanyama. And the Detroit Pistons, who we already know are in the market for a big, even though it seems like the roster is full of bigs. But to help out with some more offense, and a guy that, again, bringing in another vet and a guy that's been through some big playoff games to help them take that step forward. That Pistons team to me is the one that I keep going back to. This makes the most sense.
The thing with Brook Lopez as well, like those destinations all make sense. And again, I agree that the Bucks should continue to be in the running for him with all the parameters that we discussed. The thing with Brook Lopez is like, we don't really know. And from everything I can understand, we probably won't know what Brook is looking for this offseason until he actually signs wherever it is that he plans to sign and play basketball. So if it's a situation where, again, I think we all are in agreement of the role probably is diminished for Brook Lopez going forward. But if he comes back to the Bucks, is a situation like, hey, with us going forward this way, you're not going to start. We're going to bring you off the bench. This is the role that we envision for you. We don't know at this point. Would he be more inclined to go somewhere else, like in Orlando, of like, hey, you can start down here. So your role is going to be bigger. The minutes might end up being similar. You might get a little bit more down here, but you're going to have a quote unquote bigger role as a starter. Someone we can kind of guarantee you that, or like which team can just guarantee the most playing time for Brook Lopez? Like, is that what's important to him? And I'll be curious to see what his priorities end up being for whatever his decision that he makes is going to be this offseason.
The Spurs weren't really a team I considered, but I can see it. I guess I just was sort of defaulting to, it's like, well, they have Wemby, but we'll see this. Obviously he dealt with the same thing Damian Lillard did this year, the deep vein thrombosis. Hopefully that's not anything long lasting for him, but yeah, they could use another big, but I think the thing about him and Brook Lopez is like, they're their skills are a little bit duplicative. It's like Wemby is a like 15, 18 years younger version of Brook Lopez in his idealized state. So I could see it. The Magic, I don't see, because as much as Brook Lopez would like it, they are pretty stacked in that front court. Besides Banchero and Wendell Carter Jr., I mean, they still have Jonathan Isaac. They still have Goga Batadze. They seem to want to retain Morris Wagner, but he is he's going to come back on a minimum, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And then the Pistons, yeah, I thought about them. I mean, they have Duran, who certainly doesn't have an outside game, and then maybe they bring back Paul Reed, but their other guy in the front court is Isaiah Stewart, who looked to be like a stretch big coming into the season, but then barely took any threes at all this year. So I don't know how much that 2 years ago you would buy it, but I think with either of those teams, he might, certainly with Orlando, he's probably looking at a minimum.
And that's one that also kind of interested me in Atlanta, because I don't think Clint Capella is going to be on that team next year. Yeah.
Yeah, they've just got Okongwu. I don't know. I think they have Mohamed Way behind him. I may be pronouncing it wrong.
Gay, who saved his best for the games against the Bucks.
Against the Bucks, exactly. You could. I can see the fit in these places, but I think it just comes down to do they want to use that taxpayer mid-level on Brook Lopez, or is there a player who will help them out a bit more than a backup center, and a guy who's a true center, who can only play the 5, but will be coming off your bench. Do you really want to use your main free agent acquisition tool for a limited player like that?
Yeah, and I think as we bring it to a close here, Camille, the interesting part is what we don't have the answer to, and that's, as you mentioned, what Brook is looking for. I don't think, as much as I personally hope it would be the case, I don't think you can even confidently say, well, all things being equal, if everybody's offering the same, that he'll just stay here in Milwaukee, because he nearly bolted for the Houston Rockets for what I would assume was a similar, if not same deal 2 summers ago. So that's one of the more interesting ones, is there is going to be a market for Brook Lopez, and where it is that shows the most interest, and what is plan B for the Bucks too, because look, if he leaves, I'm not saying that Jericho Sims is the Brook Lopez replacement, but it puts even more pressure on, okay, I think Jericho Sims is a name that's going to come up with a lot of other teams too, of this is a cheap, affordable young guy that can switch out there on the perimeter, that let's bring him into the fold. And it puts a lot of pressure to retain him if you lose Brook Lopez.
Yeah, he's someone who could be on that taxpayer mid-level maybe for some teams too, but the Bucks also do have his bird rights.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
They can give him much more than a minimum.
Yeah, it'll be Jericho Sims is another one where it's like I think we've seen enough from him last year of saying like this is someone who we should bring back. Again, I know that there's going to be questions around his fit next to Giannis going forward because he is a non-shooting big, but let's see if these coaches can find some ways to scheme that into something that is not going to kill you when they share the court together, because you can unleash them defensively in a way that can cause havoc and lead to other buckets. But again, like it's nice just to have different guys who can give you different things depending on what the situation calls for. Like versatility is so key. And Jericho Sims is a piece that he can give you some things that we have not had from a Bucks big in God, I don't know how long.
Yeah, it's long story short, as we've said over the last 2 days here, it's going to be a very interesting offseason for the Bucks, and at least one where you have options, and it's not just another year of, well, is this guy going to sign for $3 million because that's all we have to offer here? A lot of things are going to be in play for the Bucks here over the course of the summer. That'll do it for today's show. Our thanks to Van for his time these last few days, sharing his insights. For Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk with you guys once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.